Shakespeare comes back again and again to questions about how and why men and women do what they do, the roles they play on the stage of their lives. And no questions are more fraught than those around love and lust, sex and gender, and the blurred lines around dissembling, confusion, misunderstanding, and deceit. Sometimes even the people involved don't know what they are doing. And that's part of what makes Shakespeare's plays so resonant in our own times. We're all aware of the confusions around identity. From the Stratford Festival, a forum about the slippery process of interpreting Shakespeare, getting from the page to the stage, and in particular about the minefields of sex and gender. Actors Maev Beaty and Abbey, scholars Jyotsna Singh and Alexa Alice Joubin, and director and actor Jonathan Goad in conversation with Ideas producer Philip Coulter.
We should move on to the last of the three plays that we're looking at today, which is The Taming of the Shrew. And we can say that The Taming of the Shrew may not be a problem play, but it's a problematic play. Here we have an impoverished, charming bully, Petruchio, who marries the brash and smart and eternally angry Catherine for her money. And determined to make her into a nice subservient wife, he spends most of the play humiliating and belittling her. Catherine, for her part, gives as good as she gets, but somewhere in all of this they do seem to find true love, and by the end she has at least the outward appearance of the good wife, but it's still a problem play. So this is the scene where they first meet and where Petruchio employs what you might call the Mortal Kombat technique of love play. It's very funny, but... So, Johnny, just throw to you to do a setup for this. What's your read about this scene, and how would you enter into the thinking about how to direct it?
Sure. So my bullet point about the play. Taming of the Shrew is very near Punch and Judy. The play is grounded in need and huge appetites. So this scene, and there's quite a setup too. We see other lovers. This scene, hotly anticipated, is a great sparring match between two, in essence, equals. It is outrageous as it is real. It ebbs and flows with witty, half-witty, and crude barbs. The opposing objectives couldn't be clearer, and yet, underneath, what do they really think of each other? That's what I wrote about this scene.
Ambiguity again. What do they really think about each other? Okay, so Maev and Graham, over to you for the classic scene.
Yeah.
Maev, start again with you.
I play a few characters in the canon that I believe that I solved from the inside. And I thought, I get it. I can justify every word this character says. I've built a whole thing where I think I can convince the audience that everything that happens should happen was going to happen. And then I inevitably leave the theater and people stop me and say, "Oh, God, I hate that speech at the end." Or, "Oh, I can't, what a, I think, weren't you watching everything we built that justified the," and so that's kind of a fantastic problem that we keep coming back to, is how to get the audience to see all the journey that we built inside that justifies it. So this is the starting point for these two, and all I can say is this, what do they really think about each other? What Johnny has given would be a fantastic question to go in.
I would only add, yes, I mean, problem play indeed, and I love what Johnny said about equals, because it's interesting. Maev just said what they think of the other person. I think what's super important here is what they think about themselves, because I think the Petruchio has deep faults, and he's very vulnerable, and he's very scared, and that manifests itself. At least that's one interpretation of approaching this scene, of a man that is very insecure about this, and has a deep connection to this woman, because not dissimilar to the first scene we read, they're two people who think one thing about themselves, but the audience is seeing something quite different from the outside, I think. And I think that's a step into the scene for sure. Good morrow, Kate. Or that's your name, I hear.
Well, have you heard, but something hard of hearing. They call me Catherine that do talk of me.
You lie, in faith, for you are called plain Kate and bonny Kate, and sometimes Kate the cursed, but Kate, the prettiest Kate in Christendom. Kate of Kate Hall, my super dainty Kate, for dainties are all Kates, and therefore, Kate, take this of me, Kate of my consolation, hearing thy mildness praised in every town, thy virtue spoke of, and thy beauty sounded, yet not so deeply as to thee belongs, myself am moved to woo thee for my wife.
Moved? In good time. Let him that moved you hither remove you hence. I knew you at the first. You were immovable.
Why, what's a movable?
Joint stool.
Thou hast hit it. Come, sit on me.
Asses are made to bear, and so are you.
Women are made to bear, and so are you.
No such jade as you, if me you mean.
Alas, good Kate, I will not burden thee, for knowing thee to be but young and light.
Too light for such a swain as you to catch, and yet as heavy as my weight should be.
Should, buzz.
Well ta'en, and like a buzzard.
Oh, slow-winged turtle, shall a buzzard take thee?
Aye, for a turtle, as he takes a buzzard.
Come, you wasp. Faith, you are too angry.
If I be waspish, best beware my sting.
My remedy is then to pluck it out.
Aye, if the fool could find it where it lies.
Who knows not where a wasp doth wear his sting? In his tail.
In his tongue.
Whose tongue?
Yours, if you talk of tails, and so farewell.
What, with my tongue in your tail? Nay, come again. Good Kate, I am a gentleman.
That I'll try.
Oh.
It's terrible to stop there. Let's talk about this play, and of course the elephant in the room is the violence in the play. When you are staging Shrew, are there ways in which we can think about making the violence, which is presented in such a way that it is comical, and of course it's designed to be that way, and it's hard not to play it that way. How do we get away with what Alexa has called the taming of the play?
Yes, I think the other aspect of the play to tame, obviously, is the violence. It's good to diminish it. I believe art would become less interesting if it is censored this way. So I believe the violence should be front and center, but for what kind of purpose? It becomes interesting. I am more in favor of preserving the violence and perhaps compelling the audiences to think about what Kate, for example, really think. Right? She's a very flamboyant character, center of the show, says a lot of things, but she doesn't, of course, never means what she says.
Jyotsna, I want to throw to you, obviously Dustin, this question too, but I wanted to talk to you about what the scene is telling us, maybe about the way in which, in this play, and maybe in the wider world too, that men and women act in different ways in what we might call the act of wooing.
Think of how women in the audience at the time would look at the play. I think this scene is really interesting because she keeps hearing the word shrew applied to her. Instead, he is saying the prettiest Kate, the nicest Kate, and he is holding an image before her that she has never seen before. And so she's seeing a different part of herself, and I think there's a part of it, I always see that she likes this compliments. It appeals to her. The idea of women's speech was very radical at the time. You know, there were images of women with locks on their mouths. So I think to understand the violences, we have to see that Shakespeare was attuned to that cultural discourse. And yet, he pushed against that discourse in interesting ways. You know, he showed violence, but they both understand the power of language. So in the end, they realize, we can get a lot of money, I just have to put my hand under his foot and he'll win the wager. That's how I sort of, in the end, I feel that they are both very smart people. And in this battle of wits, that's what they find the winning hand.
I had a chance to do this shrew here years ago, and it always struck me that first line, "Good morrow, Kate, for that's your name I hear," because picking up on what you're saying, he's not sure if the beautiful creature he's looking at is what he's been told about. Right. And that's the first meeting of them. So it's a question in his mind to say, I don't know if you're what everyone described. And you see this so often in Shakespeare, right? I mean, it's that opportunity of being told something. I've always wanted to see this done with Caliban in The Tempest, that a description is made of that creature. But when you see the creature, it's not what you were told. And that's the thing we've been talking about identity and language.
It's so true. I think Kate finally meets her equal. Kate only becomes really interesting, sparkling when Patricia finally shows up. And that's when really Kate comes to life. So you may argue that they're equals and they find, you can think of it as more consensual perhaps.
Well, I think that's one of the things too. We engage with Catherine on stage, and we immediately recognize a heroine, and then the end of the play somehow can feel like a betrayal, which of course, as you pointed out, I don't necessarily think it is, and most likely is not, but it's one of those things that we carry. We carry the expectations of our heroine, and then we feel disappointed by them, and that somehow becomes problematic.
I think the beauty of imaginative literature, especially Shakespeare, is lesson in ambiguity. Unfortunately, people embrace that less and less. In the U.S., for example, there's strong political polarization. The people live in absolutes, both sides. And I've often told my students that's a huge problem, especially when you approach imaginative literature with literal mindedness. You're not willing or able to liberate your mind from it. And so they latch on to what Kate literally says. They are incapable now to parse the layers, it's meant parodically perhaps. No, and there's this demand sometimes from this generation of students I'm having of what I see as being lectured to, but they see that as empowering and feminist. A kind of a very superficial plot level, literal mindedness, and this is empowering plot, and the Shrew is not.
Can we end kind of where we began, the question of gender and gender identities here? And I guess in this particular play, what interests me is the degree to which Shakespeare is showing us that they have, in effect, schooled each other. There is a blending of minds, and as in, I guess, in any good relationship, a blending of identities too. So they are, there is male and female, and it gets to your point about the blurring of gender and the idea of trans in its largest sense. There's that in the play too, on that deeper level. Like if you can get your head over the idea of the problem of the violence, there's something a lot more subtle going on.
I think I would just like to second what everybody else said. The real issue in the last few years, and I think we are all concerned about social problems and other problems in the world, and we are trying to use literature as a kind of tool to solve those problems. And I think literature has to make you think deeply and broadly and widely about the problems and arrive at your journeys. And I'm actually troubled by the way literature is being ideologically flattened, even, by people I share their views with. We are all feminists, and I think when you flatten literature, then you lose the immense ability to actually think through these issues. Why are men violent? Why is there violence? Why is there coercion? But when you condemn certain things, then the ideology is over. So in this play, there are many ways to keep the gender issue alive and talk about it and talk about power and, class, and he's poor and he's a money grubber, all of those issues. But if you just shut them off, then there's nothing left. Then you don't do the play.
And when we put them into performance, I just read a beautiful article calling for the continued need for secular communion, as they referred to it, that theaters offer, as religion becomes more parsed south of the border and becomes more political. We still need spaces. When you put it in front of an audience, they'll interpret what they want. They'll bring all their love and hate and bias and everything to it. But that's communion, and that's the beauty of theater. And what we're saying is when you put these plays into a space, Douglas Campbell used to talk about an ectoplasm that goes between actors and audience, and we need that more than ever now, and we need to put this stuff, as you're saying, not edit it back, but put it out there in front of people for discussion. If your students are having those discussions, that's fantastic. They're having the discussion. It's in the arena, and that's important.
Yeah. And in that, what is shared cannot preach. It has to invite. There can be, of course, moral arguments made, but in the end, it is something about the shared community having a voice in that as well.
On Ideas, you've been listening to From Page to Stage, a discussion from the Stratford Festival about the challenges around issues of sex and gender in staging Shakespeare's plays. Our thanks to Jyotsna Singh and Alexa Alice Joubin, and to Stratford Festival company members Jonathan Goad, Maev Beaty, and Graham Abbey. The program was produced by Philip Coulter. Our web producer is Lisa Ayuso. Technical production, Danielle Duval. Our acting senior producer is Lisa Godfrey. The executive producer of Ideas is Greg Kelly, and I'm Nala Ayed.